On a dark day, two friends, Asahi and Izumi, found Ked lying on the ground. When they asked what had happened, Kid seemed to be in such deep shock from the tragedy he had just experienced that he couldn't answer anything. Everyone has conflicts, worries, and old emotional wounds they don't want anyone to know about, and Kei, our main character, is no different. After that incident, a year passed as Kei tried to deal with his pain. It seems he transferred to an all-boys school due to the trauma, something his former teacher thought was a relief for him. Meanwhile, Kei himself believed it was normal and that his wounds would heal in a few years, as if nothing had ever happened. And now, in the present, he was casually buying a canned drink at a convenience store. After paying for it, he stepped outside and reassured himself that everything was fine, that today would be just another normal day. Later, when he got to school, Kei walked into his classroom cheerfully, wanting to share something with his friends, Izumi and Asahi. For the first time in his life, Kei had received a message from a girl he didn't know. Okid thought that maybe this was a sign of a new life beginning for him. However, his friend suggested it was most likely a man or a scammer, which surprised Kei, who asked how they could be so sure. Izumi added that even if it was a girl, she could still be a bad person, a honey trap or something weird. Still, Kei found it hard to believe, so he showed his friends her profile picture to prove that she was really cute. Izumi immediately pointed out that the picture might not even be hers, since it's common for people to just grab random photos from the internet. Asahi asked to borrow Kad's phone to look at the messages, and then confirmed that they were full of red flags for a scam. Kid was a little disappointed, but Asahi reassured him that they've known each other since middle school, so he only wanted what was best for Cade. That's why he said that being distrustful of naivety is a virtue in itself. Cade said he shouldn't call it a virtue so casually. And besides, he felt bummed out that all his excitement about the conversation had vanished now that he knew the truth. Cade mumbled about wanting a girlfriend or something similar and being able to fall in love like a normal person. Asahi and Izumi listened and then started advising Cade that the online world is a scary place and that he should cancel his phone plan. Asahi joked that Cade should cancel his home internet package too. Cade asked if the internet had ever hurt any of their relatives. And thinking about it, he wondered how they knew so much about things like that, including how to spot a fake profile picture. Both friends went quiet for a moment and then said they'd just heard rumors. But in reality, they had experience receiving messages and finding out the sender was actually an old man running scams. Kaid asked that if meeting people online was so dangerous, how was he supposed to meet girls? Asahi replied that there are plenty of sites and that he just needed to find someone who seemed trustworthy. Suddenly, Keed felt something pull him back and realized the zipper on his bag had gotten caught on a charm on a girl's handbag. The girl apologized again and offered to pay for it since it was her fault. Keed told her not to worry about it, since it was just a decoration. Asahi praised him, saying that was a very smooth move, even though it could have been a chance to meet a new girl. But surprisingly, Keed was silent and sighed, saying that the situation actually made him nervous. Asahi and Izumi breathed a sigh of relief, seeing that he was okay, then teased Keed because he couldn't handle awkward situations. Keed looked embarrassed, while Asahi and Izumi were just happy that everything turned out fine. The next day, after school, Keed went to his friends and told them he'd received another message during class, and they assumed it was definitely a scam without even needing to look. Later, as the boys were leaving the school, they saw a beautiful girl standing in front of the school gate. Keed realized she was the girl from yesterday. She was flustered to see Kaid and expressed her gratitude for finding him, as she had been trying to look for him. She had guessed Kaid might be a student at this school, but she didn't expect him to attract so much attention. Keid said that was a given, since this was an all-boys school. Izumi and Asahi decided it was better to leave Keid with the girl, so they left. The girl apologized to Keed for what happened before, but Keed told her she didn't need to apologize. Keed wondered where his friends had gone, and then the girl mentioned she had something else she wanted to say to him. The girl asked if she could borrow Kide for a moment, since they were attracting too much attention. Kate agreed, and they went to a corner by a wall to talk. Kate took a good look at the girl and realized she was very beautiful. The girl said that she wanted to be honest, while Kide secretly wished he could date a girl like her. Surprisingly, she suddenly confessed, saying she fell in love with Kate at first sight. Kate was completely stunned by this unexpected confession. She explained that after meeting Kide the day before, she couldn't stop thinking that he was the one. Kate was confused because he knew nothing about her, but the girl replied that she understood, and because of that, she wasn't asking for an answer right away. She wanted them to get to know each other, and if Kate still wasn't interested in her after that, she would give up. Kate's face turned bright red when he heard that. The girl expressed her desire to start as friends and gave him her phone number, saying that if he didn't want it, he could just throw it away. Kate felt shy but took her number, thinking to himself that his youthful days were finally beginning. With this surprise, he was overjoyed that he could finally get the girlfriend he dreamed of and become a normal person. Kide thanked her for this, while his friends were secretly watching from behind the wall, guessing that Kide had just received a confession. Asahi was glad they had quietly withdrawn earlier, to give the two of them some space. Izumi said it was because they always looked out for their friends' romantic opportunities. The girl introduced herself as Arisaka Tsubasa, a second-year student. And Kid introduced himself as Sito Kid. He thought they could call each other by their first names. Tsubasa agreed and said it was time for her to go home, or she would miss her bus. She apologized for taking up Kide's time and hoped he would contact her. Suddenly, a child running down the street tripped and fell into Tsubasa, pushing her towards Kid. Tsubasa couldn't avoid falling into Kid, but the scene triggered a memory of Kide's trauma, causing him to suddenly freeze up. Tsubasa fell on top of Kid, and he could only brace for the impact. She quickly apologized to Kid, but noticed he was just mumbling incoherently, his eyes vacant with fear. Tsubasa didn't expect Kid to react that way. While his friends, who initially thought he was in a lucky situation, suddenly realized that Kid wasn't moving at all. And while Tsubasa worriedly called Kid's name, his friends arrived and introduced themselves as his friends. The girl explained the situation, that someone had pushed her, causing her to fall into Kid, and she worriedly asked if he was okay. Asahi asked if she was hurt. Tsubasa replied that she was fine. At the same time, they checked and saw Kid wasn't injured either, so she shouldn't worry and could go catch her bus. Still, Tsubasa didn't want to leave like that, but Asahi said that Kid probably wouldn't want to be seen after such an embarrassing fall. Tsubasa thought that might be true and apologized for not realizing it, then decided to head home. Meanwhile, Asahi hadn't wanted or expected Kid to have a panic attack. Right then, due to his mental trauma, they were worried about Kid. So they helped him up and walked him home, reassuring him along the way that he didn't need to be afraid. But in Kid's mind, the image of the training room and his former teacher kept replaying, along with the haunting things she did to him, even though he had begged her to stop. After that incident, Kid's friends were the ones who found him, and what they found around Kid were his stripped-off pants, his shoes scattered about, and Kid in a worse state, lying on the ground, covering his mouth with his hands and trembling in fear, repeating the word "stop" over and over. They helped him sit up, but when they asked what had happened, Kid tremblingly said that he had been attacked by a woman. Back in the present, Kid's friends brought him to a park and let him sit down to rest. They asked if he was feeling any better. Kid started to say that when interacting with store clerks or when meeting women, he usually didn't feel like there was a problem, which made him think that everything was okay. He always told himself that he was a normal guy, just like everyone else. But now he realizes that he can't go back to being normal anymore, no matter how hard he tries. Worried, Asahi and Izumi told Kid that they don't think he's any different from anyone else. The next day, in class, Asahi recalled that Kid hadn't had a single panic attack since junior high, and that it had been 3 years since they transferred to the all-boys school. He said that it's normal for Kid to want a girlfriend, and he always thought everything would be fine for him. When they talked about girls with Kid, he always seemed happy, talking about the messages he'd received. But after what just happened, Asahi wondered if Cade was forcing himself or if they had done something wrong. Izumi thought that up until now, they hadn't done anything wrong, and until yesterday, Cade himself also thought everything was fine. Izumi said they couldn't help but try to protect Cade after what happened with that teacher. Meanwhile, Cade stood at the school gate, telling himself he should act cheerful like always to be a normal guy. He walked into the classroom with a bright expression, wishing his friends good morning and saying that there were no scam messages today. Asahi and Izumi noticed Cade seemed cheerful and asked if he had called the girl he met yesterday. Cade replied that he hadn't called her yet, but had saved her number. Asahi and Izumi said that was cruel because he had told her they could start as friends, and now she might be thinking he'd rejected her. Cade felt guilty because he realized that too. But he was worried that after he acted so weird the day before, she surely wouldn't want anything to do with him anymore. And in the end, he couldn't even say goodbye to her. Asahi and Izumi disagreed with Cade's thinking, arguing that the worst thing would be not sending her a message if he was really worried. Asahi advised Cade not to overthink it, and that just sending a simple thank you message for yesterday would be enough. Cade thought they were right, and he wanted to get to know Tsubasa better so they could truly become friends and have a normal relationship, to prove to himself that he too could live like a normal person. After 3 hours of thinking about how to reply, Cade had drafted an extremely formal and serious message to send to a girl for the first time in his life. Tsubasa replied that his message was too stiff, but her response was friendly, saying she was glad Cade wasn't hurt anywhere because she had been worried. A few days passed and Cade was texting with Tsubasa regularly. Later, Asahi came over and asked if he was still in touch with that girl. Cade said it had been a week since they started talking. To Izumi, however, it seemed like Cade wasn't as excited as he'd expected. Cade replied that he had been 5 times happier up until yesterday. That is, until Tsubasa asked him something. He showed Izumi a text from her, asking if they could meet up after school. Asahi and Izumi were impressed by the girl's boldness in asking Cade out so soon, but Cade was worried, wondering if he'd be okay meeting her. Cade was still anxious after what had happened that day, and Asahi and Izumi recalled it as well, causing them to fall silent for a moment. Then Asahi asked Cade if he wanted them to come along. Cade refused, saying who meets a girl with their guardians. However, they were still worried something similar might happen again, so they decided to visit the school nurse, Mr. Miyamoto, as he often gave great advice to students who needed help. Izumi asked Mr. Miyamoto if he knew about Cade's past, and Mr. Miyamoto replied that he'd been briefed during the interview with Seto Cade's family. Asahi then explained the situation, that Cade had recently bumped into a girl by accident and had a relapse. Mr. Miyamoto could guess that it must have been really bad. Cade said that thanks to his friends calming him down, he was doing better, but it was the first time he'd had a relapse since starting high school, so he was pretty shaken. On top of that, a lot happened, and he'd just been asked out on a date. Mr. Miyamoto congratulated Cade, thinking to himself how such a strange situation had turned into a date. Cade got straight to the point, saying he was wondering what he should do if the panic attack happened again, and that he wanted to do his best without running away from the situation. Miyamoto could see that Cade was truly trying his best. Cade asked the nurse what he thought about it and whether he should meet the girl again. Asahi and Izumi weren't against it, though they were still a little worried, so they came to Miyamoto to see if there were any measures they could take. Miyamoto asked Cade if he felt scared of physical contact with others, and Cade said he didn't, since he was still comfortable playing soccer with people. When Miyamoto asked if he was afraid of girls, Cade immediately replied that he actually really wants a girlfriend. Hearing that, Miyamoto saw no problems with his daily life at the all-boys school, which suggested the panic attacks might only be triggered by certain conditions that reminded him of his trauma. After taking a look at Cade, Miyamoto suggested that if he could trust someone and explain his circumstances to them, as long as there was mutual understanding, it would be better. While Seto Cade would feel more at ease, the risk of him getting hurt was also high. So Miyamoto advised him to avoid any sudden physical contact, They couldn't let their guard down when a panic attack had just happened so recently. Miyamoto didn't think it was necessary to lie and pretend Cade was a germaphobe, so he suggested Cade could just tell the girl he wasn't comfortable with close contact. He also made sure to mention that some girls really like physical affection, something Miyamoto had learned from his experience working at an all-girls school. Cade wondered if Mr. Miyamoto was afraid of girls, but aside from that, he asked if telling someone he didn't want to be touched would make him seem too self-conscious. Since he wasn't a girl, Miyamoto replied that the logic that it's okay for guys to be touched by others is very strange, and in a way, it also leads to sexism against oneself and others. Cade felt reassured hearing those words and got a little emotional as he agreed that Miyamoto was right. Asahi and Izumi noticed Cade seemed more relieved. Afterwards, Cade cheered up as he felt better, and with that settled, he now needed to think about how to reply to the text. Asahi joked that it would probably take him another 3 hours to think of a reply, and Izumi thanked Miyamoto for listening to Cade. As the lunch break was about to end, Cade said goodbye to the nurse. Miyamoto called him back and said that it's a good thing to want to try and that he'd be cheering for him. Cade smiled, encouraged by his words. After he left, Miyamoto recalled how Cade had answered about wanting a girlfriend, and remembered when Cade's parents said their son had gotten back on his feet and returned to normal on his own. But now, Miyamoto could see that he wasn't really back to normal just yet. Meanwhile, Cade arrived at the spot where he and Tsubasa had agreed to meet. He was feeling nervous because she'd confessed to him, which meant whether or not they became a couple was up to him. He wondered if it would be rude to date Tsubasa when he wasn't even sure if he liked her or not. Regardless, he decided to follow Ms. Miyamoto's advice about being uncomfortable with close contact. Tsubasa walked up with 2 drinks in her hands, telling Cade he'd arrive before she did. Cade replied that he was early because homeroom ended early today. There was a tense silence between them. Then, Tsubasa said she had a milk coffee and a milk tea and asked Cade which one he wanted. Cade thanked her, but wasn't sure which one to choose, and he grew even more anxious because it meant he would have to touch her hand when taking the cup. Just the thought of it made him hesitate, wondering if it would be okay to take it with even that little bit of contact. Cade looked at the 2 cups, thinking about how his hand would touch hers when he took one, and whether that would be okay. But when Tsubasa saw Cade just staring at the cups, she apologized, thinking that since both cups were the same color, it was hard to tell which was which. She started looking at the side of the cups to read the labels. But Cade suddenly took a cup from her hand. As their hands touched, they both blushed. Cade asked how much his milk coffee cost. She told him it was fine, and that she was just happy he came to see her, even though she called him on such short notice. The drink was Tsubasa's way of saying thank you. Cade looked at her smile and realized she was actually really cute, and that their hands touching naturally wasn't anything to worry about. After that, they went to an arcade to play games, and they both had a really fun time together. Tsubasa used to go to the arcade often with her friends, and she thought Cade was really good at video games. Afterward, they went to a restaurant to eat, sat down, and started talking. Tsubasa wondered if it was okay for her to ask Cade if she came off as weird or unapproachable. Cade looked at her when he heard the question, since he didn't understand what she meant. Tsubasa further explained that she went to an all-girls school and didn't have a single male friend, let alone a boyfriend. Tsubasa confessed to Cade that her heart had been pounding all day, and that she was glad he was so easy to talk to. Cade felt the same way, since he didn't have much experience with girls either, and could only look a girl in the eyes for 2 seconds before shyly looking away. Tsubasa was surprised to hear that, realizing they were more alike than she thought. Cade's cheeks flushed after hearing her thoughts, and he asked why she thought he was a good match for her in the first place. He wondered if he should have even asked that. Tsubasa's eyes lit up as she shared her thoughts with him. She explained to Cade that when they passed each other and their bag straps got tangled, it was such a rare occurrence that it must have been fate. Hearing the word fate was something he didn't expect from her, but then he started to think about it. Tsubasa closed her eyes and remembered the first time they met. Just yesterday, when he walked past her, In her eyes, he looked like a prince, and she was so impressed with how smoothly he handled the situation. Hearing words like smooth and prince made Cade sure that Tsubasa was a romantic. Tsubasa got nervous after saying all that and apologized to Cade if he felt uncomfortable. Cade smiled at her and told her it was okay. Tsubasa started telling him how she thought he was wonderful, kind, and full of life, just like the man of her dreams. But in Cade's mind, he knew he definitely wasn't that kind of person. Tsubasa went on to say that she wanted to keep getting to know him more from now on, and Cade wanted to get to know more about her too. Tsubasa smiled at him and said she was happy they could talk about so many things right from the start, because she wasn't used to talking to guys and found it too embarrassing. She added that if she tried to act all cool now, she'd only be the one to suffer for it later. Tsubasa fell silent for a moment, realizing she had been thinking about him more than she let on. But before Cade could reply, a few girls walked into the cafe and waved at Tsubasa. The girls approached the table, and one of them pointed at Cade, asking if he was Tsubasa's boyfriend, then teased her, saying she now knew why Tsubasa had rushed out of class today. She had a date. Tsubasa blushed and immediately said that wasn't it, that they were still just friends. The girls kept teasing her, while Cade tried to act normal, finding it hard to manage himself or make conversation with so many girls around. One of the girls started to introduce herself as Tsubasa's classmate, but when she looked at Cade, she recognized him instantly. Tsubasa was surprised and asked if she knew Cade. The girl said yes, explaining that she knew Cade because they went to the same junior high school. Hearing that, Cade was suddenly hit with a memory of teachers in the staff room gossiping about him. The rumors about him being attacked, calling him a victim. All the talk about the victim and the rumors about him applying to an all-boys school after the incident flooded Cade's mind. He remembered standing at the door, facing all of it. While everyone thought going to an all-boys school would be a huge relief for him, Cade quickly snapped back to the present when the girl asked if he remembered her, since they were in the same class. Cade's mind felt chaotic as he grappled with too many thoughts at once. The girl recognizing him and claiming to be a junior high classmate, who she was, what year she was in, and how her face looked familiar. But he couldn't remember her name. All he could remember was the incident that made him leave school, and he accepted the fact that he had been assaulted by a woman at school. After that incident, he didn't go to school for an entire year. Cade took a deep breath and apologized to everyone, saying he had to leave. He left money for the bill and started walking out of the restaurant. Tsubasa was still confused and shocked by what had just happened with Cade. She stood up and asked her friend to help pay the bill, promising to pay her back tomorrow. Her friends assured her it was fine and told her to go after Cade. Meanwhile, the girl who claimed to be Cade's classmate wondered what had happened to him and whether the rumors she had heard about Cade were true. Tsubasa ran after Cade to stop him. When she tried to grab his hand, Cade yanked his hand away and shouted, telling her not to touch him. Tsubasa looked at him confused, and Cade knew he had just ruined everything by yelling at her like that. He apologized to Tsubasa but still decided to leave. Cade kept running until he met up with his friends and told them the whole story of what happened with Tsubasa. They weren't sure if Cade's emotions were just all over the place. Asahi thought Tsubasa definitely had a special connection to Cade, for better or worse. Meanwhile, Cade felt the girl's face was familiar, but he just couldn't remember her name. Izumi thought deeply, wondering who would have expected Cade to run into a junior high classmate, especially while he was with Tsubasa. Cade thought about everything that happened today and said it was all fun until the girls showed up. But he was sure it would have been even more fun if they were actually on a date. His friends assured him he didn't need to worry, that this time was just an unfortunate incident. Asahi confidently explained to Cade the ratio between his uncertainty and his feelings for Tsubasa. He said that Cade's feelings were probably balanced almost equally between liking Tsubasa and his uncertainty. Izumi gave Asahi a skeptical look, while Cade looked even more stressed after hearing Asahi's theory. Izumi said there was a high chance that the classmate Cade met in the cafe might have told Tsubasa about his past. Maybe no one knew exactly what had happened, but there were faint rumors when Cade stopped coming to school. Tsubasa replied immediately that it was okay, She was just worried about him and wanted to make sure he was all right. She also said that her friends didn't think anything bad about him at all. Keith felt relieved to know that Aya, the friend who recognized him, hadn't said anything negative about him to Tsubasa. However, Tsubasa also asked if something else had happened between him and Aya that she didn't know about. Cade thought about this, now knowing the friend's name was Aya. After a while, Cade got home and saw a message from Tsubasa saying she was worried about him and asking if she'd done anything to upset him. He wondered if she thought he was incredibly weird. Because after all, he had left in such a hurry and hadn't even contacted her afterward. He couldn't just leave her in the dark like that. So he texted her back and apologized for everything that had happened. However, Tsubasa also asked if something else had happened between him and Aya that she didn't know about. Keith thought about this, now knowing the girl's name was Aya, but the name didn't make him remember anything in particular. He replied to Tsubasa that nothing had really happened, and he apologized for leaving so abruptly that day. He also admitted that he had been rude to her friends by not greeting them. Right after Keith sent this message, Tsubasa texted back, saying she was glad he explained and hoped they could meet again to talk more comfortably. She didn't want their relationship to be affected by a misunderstanding. Keith felt comforted reading her words, and though he was still filled with anxiety, he knew that Tsubasa genuinely wanted to understand and be there for him. Keith heard his phone ring and panicked. When he saw the caller was Tsubasa, he picked up the phone to her worried voice, as she said she couldn't hold it in any longer and just had to call. She asked if he was free to talk right now. Keith's eyes lit up and he immediately agreed, telling her he was in his room. Tsubasa said that she knew they had only met recently, so she didn't expect him to tell her everything right away. But she also added that he was always apologizing to her, and he really didn't need to. He could be more relaxed. She asked if he hadn't enjoyed their outing. Keith immediately replied that he'd had a lot of fun, which made Tsubasa blush and ask if they could go out together again. Cade blushed too and agreed. Hearing his reply, Tsubasa let out a sigh of relief and said they could talk later, as she was on her way home and had to hang up. She thanked Cade for picking up on such short notice. Cade blushed and thanked Tsubasa for everything, then ended the call. He closed his eyes and lay down on his bed, his mind a complete mess, unable to think straight. Meanwhile, Tsubasa also felt that something wasn't quite right at that moment, but she decided to keep two things in mind: not to overwhelm Cade, and to approach him cheerfully. She wondered if she was doing the right thing. But then the memory of Cade swatting her hand away when she tried to stop him flashed through her mind. That made her a little scared, but she pushed forward with hope, telling herself she was just inexperienced when it came to understanding boys. Meanwhile, Cade couldn't stop thinking about Tsubasa and blushed. He wasn't sure if what he was feeling was love and doubted he could find the answer on his own. Even as he asked himself this, he realized the current situation was just too complicated for him. He didn't know how he should feel about Tsubasa, afraid that if he suddenly revealed his feelings, he'd just seem weird to her. Then Cade overheard two of his classmates talking. They were discussing how one of them had just been confessed to, but he wasn't really feeling it. The other said it would be a waste to turn the girl down. Cade realized he was in a similar situation, and his eyes met Yudai's. Yudai immediately asked if Cade was thinking the same thing he was. Cade replied that he really didn't know much about love. Mitsuki, a friend known as a player by the name of Kobayashi Mitsuki, laughed and called Cade a late bloomer. Yudai was the other friend's name. Cade asked them, what if, for example, a guy gets confessed to, but the girl doesn't want to date right away and wants to start as friends first, and then after a while, the guy starts to develop feelings? What should he do then? Mitsuki remarked that the question sounded awfully specific and told Cade to think about it more simply. The girl made the first move, but now they both have feelings for each other? Cade realized it could be seen that way. Mitsuki continued, saying there was only one answer. The guy should thank the girl for waiting and confess that he likes her too and wants to date her. Hearing this, Cade blushed, his face turning bright red. Meanwhile, one of Tsubasa's friends named Momoka asked her if she was sure about Sato Kid. She couldn't stop worrying because he knew about Tsubasa's feelings for him, but was still hesitating. Tsubasa explained that she was the one who told Kate it was okay to start as friends. However, Momoka insisted that maybe Tsubasa wanted him to give her an answer quickly, just so she'd know if things were okay or not. Tsubasa thought maybe Momoka was right, because if the answer was no, it would be hard for Kate to say it. Momoka told her not to think negatively, but then asked in shock if Tsubasa was just someone convenient for Cade. Tsubasa denied it, saying Cade wasn't that kind of person. And she repeated that she had asked him if they could see each other again, and he had agreed. Momoka argued that it wasn't good that Cade was just passively reacting to whatever Tsubasa said. Now that she thought about it, Momoka said that there are a lot of guys like that. They won't take advantage of someone's kindness, but they might let the relationship become ambiguous. Since Tsubasa didn't know much about this, Momoka advised that if Cade still didn't say anything when they next met, Tsubasa should ask him directly how he felt about her. Tsubasa was flustered by Momoka's words, and then she got a notification on her phone, guessing it was from Cade. Momoka asked what he said, and the message said that it might be a bit sudden, but Cade was asking if Tsubasa was free after school today. Momoka cheered her on, while Tsubasa thought he would probably reject her. Momoka told her not to think so negatively. After school, Tsubasa went to meet Cade, and he thanked her for coming, even though he'd called her so unexpectedly. Tsubasa replied that she was happy he invited her and said he could call her anytime. She suddenly realized she was acting way too eager. She asked Cade if there was something he wanted to talk about. Cade looked around to make sure there weren't many people passing by, then began to say that he was really happy she came to the school to see him and that he also really enjoyed the time they spent together. He liked that she had called him and wanted to thank her again for everything she had done for him. Tsubasa thought the next thing he was going to say would be, "But I'm sorry," when in reality, Cade wanted to respond to Arisaka Tsubasa's efforts to make things work between them. Cade didn't expect to be able to say it so smoothly, but he realized this was his moment, and if he tried to act tough now, he'd be the one to suffer for it later. He decided to be direct, saying he didn't want to hide anything from her and that there was something he wanted to share. His hands started to tremble as he gathered the courage to say that back in middle school, he was the victim of an assault by a woman. As Cade recounted the incident from his past, Tsubasa fell silent for a moment, while he continued, explaining that he feels very uncomfortable being touched unexpectedly, and that's why he was sorry for swatting her hand away that day. Tsubasa said that it was okay, but Cade was terrified to look at her expression right now. However, since he had decided to be completely honest, he added that, despite all that, if she was still okay with him, then he wanted to go out with her. Tsubasa called out Cade's name, and when he looked up with his heart pounding, he saw her calm expression as she said she was very happy. Cade hadn't expected that kind of reaction, and Tsubasa thanked him for telling her about his past. Cade felt a sense of relief hearing that. Then Tsubasa said she had also been touched by creeps on the train, so she understood a little of how he felt. Cade hadn't expected her to share that, and she added that she was surprised to learn it happens to guys too, but she reassured him that it was all okay, and that he didn't need to worry so much about it. As for her answer to his confession, Tsubasa said yes, that she would be happy to date him. However, there was still a hint of negative doubt between them, wondering if this was really okay. Even though they were both very happy in that moment, Cade and Tsubasa started calling each other by their first names. Cade smiled as he called her Tsubasa. However, they both knew that some people, after becoming victims of terrible events, can no longer ride trains. It's not something to be taken lightly, and it's unacceptable to ignore the serious harm these wrongdoings cause. But for some reason, Tsubasa wondered why this made her feel a little strange. Meanwhile, Cade went to find his friends and announced that he was now dating Arasaka Tsubasa. Hearing this, both Asahi and Izumi were thrilled and congratulated him on getting a girlfriend. Cade said he had made them worry a lot over this. He thought he could finally enjoy a normal youth. though he still had to be careful not to rush things. Asahi and Izumi noticed that Kaid had matured, and just as they were about to say something to him, the teacher told Kaid that he was on cleaning duty that day and asked him to erase the board. As Kaid went to clean the board, Asahi asked Izumi what he thought about Kaid's progress. Izumi commented that Kaid didn't seem very excited, but they hoped things would go well for him anyway. Kaid seemed to be acting a little strange, but he figured it was because this was his first time having a girlfriend. He told himself this should be normal for a guy from an all-boys school and that he should be on top of the world. He tried to convince himself that if a good girl like Tsubasa had accepted his past, then he would eventually stop feeling so anxious. Kaid believed he just needed to get used to this slowly, and everything would be fine. Meanwhile, Momoka was thrilled for Tsubasa for finally getting a boyfriend, and Tsubasa thanked Momoka for her congratulations. Momoka then asked if they had kissed or hugged yet, but Tsubasa replied that they hadn't done that. Momoka mentioned having read about those things in manga, and Tsubasa realized that slowly, they might do things like that, which made her heart flutter. Momoka noted that even though they went to different schools, things seemed to be progressing well. She added that the two of them could talk secretly all night long, something only they would know until the next morning. Tsubasa recalled that Kaid had confided in her about the terrible thing in his past, which meant he saw her as someone very special. The scene changes to Kaid's first day of high school, where he decided to start a new life. This was an all-boys school, with no female students and mostly male teachers. The school was also quite far from his hometown, so only 2 people there knew about Kaid's situation: his friends Asahi and Izumi, who had been with him in middle school. As Kaid entered the school, he hesitated, worried if everything would be okay. His friends Asahi and Izumi put their hands on his shoulders and asked why he was being so stiff. Izumi told Kaid to act a little more cheerful, and Asahi explained that he should just be himself. Kaid realized he must have looked silly smiling, but his friends reassured him not to worry because they would always be there for him. Kaid felt grateful and happy to have friends like Izumi and Asahi. Thanks to their encouragement, he walked into the school with confidence. In the present, Saito Kaid had just gotten a girlfriend for the first time in his life, and he told Izumi and Asahi that he was meeting her the next day. Asahi mentioned that it would be their first date since officially becoming a couple, but when asked where he was taking Tsubasa, the only thing he could think of was the movie theater. He felt stressed, then suddenly wondered if he should plan the date meticulously, like renting a car and dining at a seaside restaurant. Izumi brought Kaid back down to earth, reminding him it was way too soon for things like that. Then Kaid asked if they had done their homework, and Izumi suddenly remembered he'd forgotten. He asked Asahi to see his notes, and Asahi told him he had to ask nicely. Meanwhile, Kaid overheard his classmates chatting about their fantasies with girls, and he felt uncomfortable listening to such conversations. Just then, his classmate Sahara called out to Kaid and congratulated him on getting a girlfriend. When Kaid asked how he knew, Sahara said he had accidentally overheard Kaid talking about it last week. At the same time, Mitsuki also came over and put his arm on Sahara's shoulder, saying it was great news and asking Kaid if his girlfriend was cute. Kaid remembered Tsubasa's face and honestly thought she was very cute. Mitsuki was a little jealous, then bluntly asked Kaid if he and his girlfriend had done it yet. Kaid was silent at this question, while Sahara told Mitsuki he shouldn't be asking that of a new couple. Mitsuki said that if it were his girlfriend, he would have done it with her the very next day, saying it's just normal. Sahara apologized to Kaid on Mitsuki's behalf and explained that Mitsuki was always thinking about that kind of stuff. Kaid asked nervously if those things were really normal, causing both of them to fall silent. Sahara insisted that what Mitsuki said wasn't common at all. The next day, Kaid arrived at their meeting spot feeling anxious. He remembered Sahara telling him not to pay too much attention to those things, but he wondered if it was really normal to do that with your girlfriend. On top of that, Kaid worried about whether he could truly understand Tsubasa. He placed a hand on his chest, feeling overwhelmed by how much he didn't know, and began to worry if he'd even be able to enjoy their date today. He didn't understand why he always felt this way. Just then, Tsubasa called out his name. Keed looked up and saw her in a simple dress, perfect for their date. She wished him good morning and mentioned they still had 10 minutes before their scheduled time. Keed greeted her back, thinking how cute she looked in her casual clothes. Tsubasa asked if she looked weird since he was staring at her for a little while. Keed replied that it was just because she was so cute he got a little flustered. Tsubasa blushed at the compliment, and Keed blushed just as much. They both remembered they were going to see a movie and wondered what was playing. Keed realized he was enjoying this moment and didn't need to worry about a thing. He thought to himself that since this was a date, it would be rude of him not to enjoy it. He noticed a couple in front of them holding hands. And it wasn't just one couple. Many other couples were doing the same. Now that he was out with his girlfriend, Keed wondered if he should try holding Tsubasa's hand. He mustered up his courage, remembering he was still scared, but also that nothing bad happened the last time he touched her hand. More importantly, he felt like he wanted to touch her. With that thought, Keed bravely reached out and took Tsubasa's hand. Tsubasa felt his hand touch hers, a sign of progress for them both. She was a little surprised, while Keed worried he had gone too far, and pulled his hand back, apologizing for startling her. Tsubasa smiled and said it was okay, and the two of them continued walking as before. Inside, however, Tsubasa was genuinely surprised by that moment. She remembered Keed telling her how uncomfortable he got when touched suddenly, without any warning. She realized he was trying his best, which made her incredibly happy. Keid still didn't understand why he'd let go of Tsubasa's hand. He knew that when he held her hand, he didn't need to be afraid, because Tsubasa was a kind and gentle girl, not some older woman who would do something cruel to him. Keid could trust that Tsubasa wasn't like that woman from his past, so he didn't have to be scared. But suddenly, he felt a bit of discomfort and negativity without understanding why. After that, they headed to the movie theater, where a long list of films was showing. Both Keid and Tsubasa secretly wanted to see an action movie, but worried it might ruin the mood of the date. Keid asked Tsubasa which movie she'd like to see, and she asked him the same question back. They decided to count to 3 and choose at the same time. In the end, they both chose an action movie. And were surprised by the coincidence. They laughed and went to see the movie together. The movie was exciting enough to keep them both engaged until the end. Afterward, they went shopping and then ate together. As the date was coming to an end, Tsubasa said that it felt a little lonely having to go home. And Keid listened as she went on to share that she sometimes imagined how wonderful it would be if they went to the same school. That way, they could see each other every day. But then she added that if they went to the same school, they probably wouldn't have had such a fateful encounter. No matter how they might have met, she still thought she would have had a one-sided crush on Keid and would have eventually worked up the courage to confess to him. Keid felt very moved hearing that. Tsubasa apologized for talking so much, but she was certain that if they went to the same school, she would have a lot of competition, and Keid might have found someone else. Keid denied it, saying he wasn't nearly that popular, and that even if he were in an environment with many other girls, he still believed he would have fallen in love with Tsubasa. He felt a little embarrassed after saying that. Tsubasa smiled and said that was wonderful, and that she was very happy Keid tried to hold her hand today, especially since he had said he wasn't comfortable with close contact. It meant that Keid was trying to overcome his fear. Keid knew that in his heart, he wasn't exactly trying, but he realized it must have sounded like he was. Tsubasa said she wanted to help Keid, and if he felt uncomfortable for any reason, he could let go of her hand at any time. Hearing those words moved Keid. Tsubasa asked if he wanted to try holding her hand again, and Keid agreed. He reached out and held Tsubasa's hand tightly. She asked how he felt, and Keid answered that it was okay. Although his heart was beating really fast, Tsubasa was happy and felt certain that if they kept trying together, Keid wouldn't be afraid of anything anymore. This became a special moment for both of them. Keid had never known a girl's hand could be so small and soft, and it felt so comforting to hold it, making his hand tremble. Tsubasa worriedly asked if something was wrong, and he replied that it was nothing. Keid took a deep breath to calm himself and tried not to overthink things. When they heard the announcement that the train at Platform 2 was arriving, Keid told Tsubasa that her train was here. She stood up, telling him to be careful on his way home, and thanked him for a really fun day. Keid smiled and waved goodbye to her as she left. However, after Tsubasa was gone, Keid remained sitting at the table, feeling a bit strange, with a slight tremor inside him. He looked up and thought that the date had ended without anything bad happening. The next day, Tsubasa told her friend Momoka that they held hands during their date yesterday, and Momoka was thrilled for her. Tsubasa added that Keid's height hadn't changed much, and that his hand was really warm, which made her heart race. Suddenly, they overheard some other classmates talking about a girl who might be pregnant and how she was worried about it. Tsubasa commented that it must have happened because the girl stays over at her boyfriend's house once a week. And whenever that happens, it's normal for things to go further than just meeting up. The girl's friend was advising her to protect herself and to hope her parents don't find out. Momoka remarked that those girls were talking about some crazy stuff, but Tsubasa felt a little uneasy hearing them talk about staying over every week. Momoka told Tsubasa that kind of stuff is normal for couples, and she was sure that Tsubasa's boyfriend would treat her right. Tsubasa replied that Keid wasn't some sleazy guy who would do something like that. He's pure and amazing. Momoka fell silent while Tsubasa beamed, confident in her belief. That evening, while Tsubasa was at home, she was watching a TV show with a scene of a couple, but her mom changed the channel to the news and reminded Tsubasa that her tutor was coming tomorrow. Tsubasa agreed with her mom and said she'd be home early. When she got back to her room, she sat down and thought about the conversation she'd overheard in class, which replayed in her head like a strange memory. Tsubasa decided to distract herself and get her heart pounding in a good way, so she pulled out a romance manga to read, filled with the sweet moments of a couple. She couldn't wait to see Keid again, hoping they would hold hands again, go to lots of places, and talk more to get to know each other better. Keid, the person Tsubasa adored, was the very picture of the love she had always admired. And now he was real. A few days later, Keid and Tsubasa met at a cafe, where they ordered cake and coffee. Tsubasa said she'd always wanted to visit this place and was happy they found an open spot. She also said that the atmosphere inside made her feel so calm and that the waitress was really pretty too. Keid just gave a small laugh, not sure if he should agree with her. They talked for a while before leaving the cafe. After trying a few things from the menu, all of which were delicious, Tsubasa mentioned she wanted to come back to the cafe again sometime. But she noticed Keid looked a bit flustered. As he looked at the rain, which was starting to come down hard, they didn't have an umbrella. So Keid said the rain wasn't too heavy yet and suggested they find some cover. He took off his jacket, gave it to Tsubasa, and said this would be a little better. Tsubasa worriedly asked what about him, and Keid replied that he was fine, which made her heart skip a beat. The two of them started running through the rain, laughing all the way until they reached a covered area in a park. Tsubasa thanked Keid for leading the way and asked if he was okay, since he had given her his jacket. He replied that it was no big deal. She had a small towel in her bag, model, and offered to dry Keid's hair. He accepted, which made her very happy. And Tsubasa carefully let him know before she touched him. She gently dried his hair with a towel, and Keid sat silently like a little puppy. He remembered the moment she told him to let her know if he felt uncomfortable, and realized that she was always very considerate whenever she touched him. Keid wondered if it was because she remembered what he had told her. But either way, she was a very kind girl with gentle hands and a peaceful aura that put him at ease. Keid and Tsubasa's eyes met up close, and both of them blushed as they slowly moved nearer and shared a sweet kiss. It was a sweet moment just for them, a feeling they had both cherished deep down since childhood. Tsubasa had always admired the kind of romance you see in manga and had dreamed of falling in love just like this. This moment was everything she had ever wished for, with the ideal boy she'd always dreamed of. Tsubasa cherished this moment, and so did Keid. After the kiss, they looked at each other flustered, and Tsubasa mentioned that his hair was dry now. Keed thanked her for drying his hair and for letting him borrow the towel. Tsubasa was so happy to have Keid by her side. They really are a beautiful couple. The next day at school, Tsubasa's friend asked her if she'd seen Keid again. Then another classmate came over and said she heard Tsubasa and Keid were a couple, and asked how things were going. Tsubasa replied that Keid was her first boyfriend. So there were still a lot of things she didn't know. But they had gotten to know each other a lot, and now she felt like they could talk about anything. This answer surprised her classmate. She asked Tsubasa if Keid was really her first boyfriend, because having him as a first boyfriend could be pretty tough. Tsubasa asked her what she meant by that, and was confused when her classmate asked if Keid had told her anything. Tsubasa was confused to hear that, and the other girl regretted bringing it up. Hesitantly, she said that Seto Keid had been absent from school for a while, and what she was about to say was just a rumor. She'd heard that Keid had been involved in some kind of trouble with a woman, and she advised Tsubasa to ask Keid directly to confirm. If Keid really did have a dangerous past, she thought Tsubasa should find someone else to date. After that, Tsubasa texted Keid, asking to meet him at the park where they had been before, when Keid arrived. He was confused why she chose this place, especially since he was still very aware of what had happened between them the last time. Tsubasa called his name and said she had something to talk about. She apologized if this brought up memories he didn't want to revisit, but when he told her that he was the victim of an assault by a woman, she had thought he was being harassed, and she had said a lot of things without really thinking. Keid asked why she was bringing this up now. Tsubasa replied that a girl from their middle school mentioned something about how he had been absent from school for a while, which meant he had gone through something much worse than she'd imagined. She knew Keid had said something about not being comfortable talking about it, but Tsubasa was truly sorry for bringing the subject up like this. Keid said that she didn't need to apologize, and that, first of all, it was his fault for not being clearer from the beginning. Tsubasa asked him to tell her exactly what happened, and Keid said that the story might not be a pleasant one, but he wanted her to listen to the whole truth about his time in high school. Keid recounted that back in high school, he was a shy but cheerful boy. That was also when he met a student teacher, the woman who caused him great trauma during his time at school. That teacher asked him if he had a moment, and Keid recalled that she was the student teacher, Ms. Osaka. She asked for his help because he was on the academic committee and hoped he could guide her on class activities and how to organize the morning quizzes before exams. Keid offered to bring all the printouts he had used up until then, and the teacher thanked him for his help. Ms. Osaka said that Keid was more experienced than her when it came to understanding the school and its class activities, so she would be relying on him. Keid, although shy about helping, was kind enough to spend time assisting Ms. Osaka during her training, and the two started spending more time together because of it. Keid's friends, Izumi and Asahi, teased him, saying it wasn't fair that he was always with Osaka-sensei and called him an older woman lover, which made Keid call them idiots for their teasing. Osaka intervened, saying that Seto was just teaching a few necessary things to a student teacher like herself. Izumi and Asahi said they could teach her the same things, and she just laughed it off. Osaka was a beautiful and kind teacher who was easy for students to get along with, even though she was an adult. And without exception, Keid also liked and admired her a lot, until that tragic day, when the PE teacher asked Keid to bring some materials from the storage room. Being the kind-hearted person he was, Keid agreed and went there. There, Keid found Osaka-sensei crying in the storage room. When he called her name, tears were streaming down her cheeks, and she said that she had made a mistake and got scolded today, making her feel that she probably wasn't cut out to be a teacher. She then apologized for showing such an ugly side of herself, saying she felt like a failure as an adult and a teacher. But he told her not to say such things, because her classes were easy to understand and everyone liked her. She then asked him if he would still like her, even after seeing this side of her. And he agreed, saying he would cheer her on. She looked at him with teary eyes. She said she felt so insecure. Keid looked around, wondering what he should do now. Then he offered her his handkerchief. Osaka proceeded to hug Keid, and he was startled by her sudden action. She thanked him for being so kind to her. Keed could clearly feel his heart pounding, and he became flustered, trying to tell her that her actions had surprised him. But no one knew what made Osaka decide to do what she did next. She suddenly leaned closer to Keed and asked if he could comfort her. She said that he didn't have to do anything, and that she would guide him through everything. She also said that he could keep what was about to happen a secret. Keid, still too naive to fully understand what was happening, asked her what she was planning to do with him in a place like this. Osaka started to get undressed while saying that Keid would feel good. Keid just kept repeating, "What? What?" as he watched her. She said that he should feel lucky to experience this before others and become an adult before anyone else. Meanwhile, Asahi and Izumi were looking for Keid. A student said they had seen Keid go into the gym's storage room earlier. At that same moment, Keid was enduring the assault. Every moment of the experience was like hell for him, leaving him completely frozen, unable to move, and just waiting for it all to be over. In that moment, the person in front of him was no longer the teacher he knew, but a giant monster. After the incident was over, Izumi and Asahi found Keid lying on the floor. Since then, Keid has been severely traumatized and only wants to stay in his room. His parents were heartbroken when they found out what had happened. The students who didn't know what happened started to think Keid was absent because he got into some kind of trouble, and his reputation began to be ruined by the spreading rumors. Keid was so scared he couldn't do anything. During those days, his friends Asahi and Izumi still visited him as usual, not trying to comfort him or convince him to go back to school, but just coming to be his friends. Fortunately, Keid heard that the school had taken action, and the student teacher, Osaka, had received a fitting punishment. In the second half of 9th grade, Keid returned to school and chose to attend an all-boys high school. Hearing the whole story, Tsubasa's face filled with horror, and she was at a loss for words. Keid told her not to worry, that he wasn't expecting her to comfort him, but then he realized Tsubasa had started crying out of compassion for the pain he had endured. Keid was stunned. Then he also started to cry, and he thanked her for listening to him. After he thanked her, she apologized, saying she shouldn't be the one crying. They both laughed lightly to break the heavy atmosphere. Keid reminded Tsubasa to check the time, remembering she had a session with her new tutor soon and needed to go home early. Tsubasa said that today, her mind was only on Keid, which made him blush. After that, they said their goodbyes, hoping to talk again soon. Keid felt a lot more relieved after their meeting. He told his friends and Mr. Miyamoto about sharing his past with Tsubasa. Izumi praised him for his courage, while Asahi asked what she had said. Keid mentioned Tsubasa's comment that he must have gone through so much. Hearing that, Asahi and Izumi's opinion of Tsubasa changed completely. Keid said that in any case, she had listened to him, so he thought he should update Mr. Miyamoto. Mr. Miyamoto was happy to see things were progressing well for Keid, and reassured him that he didn't need to apologize for not coming sooner. He's always there to help students when they're in trouble or need someone to talk to. Keid felt that he was an adult students could easily approach and talk to. Mr. Miyamoto's words moved Keid and his friends. Keid said he felt relieved that he no longer had anything to hide from Tsubasa. Asahi reassured Keid that he had done a great job, and the three of them continued their cheerful conversation. Meanwhile, Tsubasa realized that the truth of what happened was quite different from the rumors she had heard. In the end, Keid was truly the victim, not the troublemaker. He had confided in her about his painful past, and the first feeling Tsubasa had was happiness, because Keid had trusted her, which made her feel like there was a bond between them. That made her happy, but it also made her realize that her previous thought about them being the same was wrong. They weren't alike at all. Suddenly, Tsubasa realized she was feeling sad and couldn't understand why she was having such negative thoughts. She reminded herself that Keid was the one who was assaulted, and the issue wasn't what kind of experiences he'd had with women. Then Tsubasa saw a couple sitting together, the boy's hand resting on the girl's shoulder. That sight suddenly triggered a wave of negative emotions in her, making her heart grow heavy. That night, in her bedroom, Tsubasa started to wonder what that teacher was like. She recalled Kid saying she was very beautiful and admired by everyone. Tsubasa didn't want to think about it, but she couldn't help it and felt sorry for Kate. She closed her eyes and wondered if at first Kid had ever liked that teacher, or if they had ever kissed. Tsubasa's thoughts grew increasingly negative, and eventually, she wondered whether Kide could have called for help or tried to leave when the teacher was getting too close to him. Tsubasa knew she shouldn't be thinking like this, because Kid was the victim, and it wasn't his fault. But on the other hand, she thought about how his body had been subjected to such filthy acts, and it made Tsubasa feel disgusted. Miyamoto had been a little doubtful after Kid told his story, wondering if a teenage girl like Tsubasa felt uneasy and ran to the bathroom. Miyamoto's anxiety was completely justified, as Tsubasa felt so disgusted that she vomited repeatedly. Miyamoto understood that there are times when people don't fully understand themselves, and this was now happening to Tsubasa. She never expected to feel so utterly disgusted. All through elementary school, Tsubasa had learned about sex education, but it was just another lesson, like all the others. Later, she once asked her mother about the areas restricted to people over 18, and her mom answered that she wasn't allowed in, but that adults could go in just fine. Whenever a romantic show was on TV and the actors would mention their relationship experiences, Tsubasa's mother would turn off the TV and say that kind of entertainment was vulgar and foolish. Now, Tsubasa realized that her mother always grew uncomfortable whenever things like that came up in front of her. The thing she had witnessed but was never allowed to understand made her wonder why everyone else seemed to be enjoying their lives just fine. The next morning, Tsubasa sat up in bed, unable to sleep. She then went downstairs and said good morning to her parents. They greeted her back and asked if she was all right, since she didn't look well. Tsubasa replied that she was just thinking about some things. Then it suddenly hit her that even her own mother had done that with her father, and the negative feeling washed over her again, causing her to rush out of the house for school without eating breakfast. At school, Tsubasa struggled with her thoughts in between classes. She thought about the girl who did it, and also her teacher, an adult, who had certainly done it as well. Not only that, her friends like Aya and Momoka both had boyfriends, so they had probably experienced it too. The thought that this was normal made her feel like she was the only one who was so naive about it. She was ashamed just thinking about it. After class, Tsubasa walked home along her usual route. The past of Kid had truly shocked Tsubasa, nearly sweeping her away in a storm of chaotic emotions. She knew she had to calm down because he had told her about his past, even though it was incredibly difficult for him. She didn't want to make him feel like she was some unapproachable girl, making him insecure. Just then, Kid appeared and called her name, waving hello. He said what a coincidence it was to run into her here. Kid asked if she was on her way home. Tsubasa's heart sank. She realized that for her, it felt like everything had changed, while Kid was as calm and composed as ever. Maybe she was just overthinking things? At that moment, a man was walking right behind them, so Kid pulled Tsubasa back to keep her safe. But when his hand touched her, an unsettling feeling suddenly washed over her, making her flinch away and suddenly become anxious. Kid asked her what was wrong, but Tsubasa didn't know how to answer and could only apologize before running off. Kid was completely stunned, while Tsubasa ran, crying, wondering why her body would react that way, unconsciously rejecting his touch. Tsubasa ran down the road and across a bridge. Then she heard Kid calling her name, chasing after her with a worried look on his face. He apologized for following her, but he couldn't help but worry about her. Tsubasa told him it was nothing, but Kid pointed out how pale she looked and offered to walk with her if she wasn't feeling well. As Kid spoke, Tsubasa couldn't stop looking at Kid's body, and before she knew it, tears were streaming down her face. Kid panicked, asking if he had done something to upset her. Tsubasa could only reply that ever since hearing about his past, she felt like something was wrong with her. Kid never imagined that his past was the cause. Meanwhile, chaotic thoughts kept swirling in her mind, terrifying her, and a sense of dread began to take over. The thoughts were painful. She hated the feeling. and it was truly tormenting her. But when she looked up, Tsubasa saw that Kade's face had gone pale, as if he were horrified. She knew she shouldn't have said that and quickly told him this was her problem, that it had nothing to do with him. Kade replied that it was normal to feel disgusted after hearing something like that, and he apologized to her. He also said that asking her to just forget about it was probably too much, but he wished she had told him from the start if that's how she really felt. He wouldn't care if she couldn't stand it, or if she found it disgusting and abnormal. Tsubasa tried to say that wasn't what she thought at all, but Kade was silent, wondering if her kind words were really coming from the heart. Kade was clearly hurt, and he apologized again for making her force herself for his sake, saying she must be feeling disgusted. Tsubasa quickly denied it, insisting that she didn't find him disgusting at all. At first, she was so happy that he had confided in her. But she just didn't have any experience dealing with something like this. She thought she had finally met her ideal guy, and the love she had always dreamed of was finally becoming a reality. However, she felt insecure when she didn't understand what he was thinking, especially that first time they hung out after school when he suddenly pulled his hand away. She was really scared back then, but she still tried to accept that real love might not be like what she had imagined. However, she could never have imagined that he had a past like that. Kade listened as she went on about her feelings, that now, whenever she thinks about him, it hurts her to imagine what happened to him, wondering if it was really against his will, because, after all, he's a guy and should have been able to fight back. At that point, Kade couldn't take it anymore. He screamed at her to stop. He said that being blamed like this made him tremble and feel a sharp pain. He insisted that she could only say those words because she'd never been through anything similar. Kade begged her not to make him relive that traumatic event again. Tsubasa burst into tears, and Kade told her that she wasn't weird, that it wasn't her fault, and that he was sure the feelings she was having right now were normal. Kade couldn't stand any longer. He collapsed to his knees and said that he was wrong. He apologized for dragging her into this mess. Tsubasa was heartbroken to hear Kade's story, which made her feel uneasy and disgusted. She cried hard and started to walk away, while Kade also cried out loud, feeling like he wasn't normal. He just sat there, crying nonstop. Time passed and Kade was still there crying, knowing he needed to get up quickly, or people would think he was strange. But even so, he couldn't breathe properly. He wanted to scream, and his mind went blank as he sobbed uncontrollably. He wished someone would come and save him. Maybe Asahi, Azumi, Mr. Miyamoto, or his mom. Then he heard Asahi's voice calling his name and asking what had happened. Kade looked up, his face streaked with tears, and they helped him to his feet and took him home. There, Kade told them everything that had happened, and they were shocked that things had turned out this way. Kade felt guilty because Asahi and Izumi had given him their blessing, but things still hadn't gone well at all. Izumi told Kade not to worry about them and that there was nothing to apologize for. Kade admitted that he'd said some cruel things to Tsubasa and made her cry because of him, which made him feel like a terrible person for doing so. Izumi reassured him that he shouldn't blame himself too much, and that it wasn't entirely his fault. Asahi spoke up, saying Tsubasa was the one who hurt Kade first, and he was very firm about that. They saw Kade leaving the house, and when they asked, he said he was just going to the convenience store. Kade went out because he felt suffocated at home right then, and didn't want his mom to worry about him. He also felt bad for troubling Izumi and Asahi, and it felt like everything was repeating itself. He thought that even though he had tried, nothing had changed at all. Then Kade realized he was starting to have negative thoughts and told himself that this time just didn't work out. They had only been dating for a short while, so the wound wasn't too deep. Even so, he was still moping around as he walked, until he realized he was standing in front of the cafe where he and Tsubasa used to go. He remembered the good memories they made there. Of the day they ran through the rain together and had such a great time. He recalled the first time they met and Tsubasa's bright smile back then. Kade didn't realize when he had started to cry, because he knew he loved Tsubasa, but love alone just wasn't enough. A beautiful woman approached him and asked why he was standing in front of her cafe. She asked if he was hurt somewhere. Are you not feeling well, or are you lost? Hearing her question, Kite apologized for interrupting her business and said that he was just going through a lot. The woman took a closer look at Kite and she invited him inside her shop for a latte or something warm. After that, she led Kite inside and closed up the shop, telling him to sit wherever he liked since the shop was already closed and there were no other customers. She asked if he'd prefer hot cocoa or warm milk, but Kate replied that a latte would be fine, feeling like she was treating him like a child. As he sat down, Kate recalled his date with Tsubasa, how happy that day had been. The woman brought him his latte, and Kite said he would pay for it. She replied that there was no need, that he should consider it a small gift. Kate thanked her for the coffee and took a sip, saying that it was really delicious, which made her happy. She asked if he was the type to cry easily or if he'd been through something painful. Kate apologized to her, and when she asked why, he replied that it was because he had caused her so much trouble, and that a guy shouldn't cry in front of others. She told him that his gender didn't matter in a situation like this, because men and women, adults and children alike, all have days where they just can't stop the tears. And right now, it was just her here. No one else was going to scold Keed, so he didn't need to worry about anything. A sense of peace washed over Keed, and he began to cry in that warm, peaceful atmosphere, as if the pain in his chest and his tears were slowly draining away. He didn't know her name, her age, or anything about her past, and on top of that, she was a grown woman. He felt she was like Mr. Miyamoto, and for some reason, he felt safe with her. After feeling a bit better, Keith thanked her for the coffee and said that he still wanted to pay for the drink. She said that if that was the case, she hoped Keith would come back when he was feeling happier, as that would be the best thank you she could ask for. Kite felt happy to be treated with such kindness. However, the next day at school, Keith was absent. Mitsuki asked if he was sick, and Asahi replied that he probably was. Mitsuki guessed that maybe Kite was skipping school to go on a date with his new girlfriend. Sahara said that Kite wasn't that kind of person, while Asahi and Izumi, who knew the truth, remained silent. That afternoon, at the all-girls school, many of the girls squealed when they saw two handsome boys appear at the school gate. They wondered if the two were someone's boyfriend, and some even wished they could talk to them. As Tsubasa was walking along like any other day, she was startled when the two of them called out her name. It was Asahi and Izumi. Asahi asked if she could spare a moment to talk with them. Izumi and Asahi started to talk to Tsubasa, who was with her friend Momoka. Tsubasa recognized them as Kai's friends and asked if they needed something from her. Seeing as they'd come all the way to her all-girls school, Asahi pointed out that she had done the same thing before and brought up how she must have heard everything from Keed, felt disgusted, and then broke up with him. He asked if he was right in assuming that she was disgusted by what she heard. Tsubasa replied that he didn't have to use a word like disgusted. Izumi, worried, quickly said they hadn't come here to blame her, and that it was a difficult thing to ask her to easily accept the truth from the start. However, Asahi asserted that he had, in fact, come here to blame her, because it was Tsubasa who had approached Keed first, only to end up hurting him. He said that was pretty selfish and asked if she didn't think so too. Izumi reminded Asahi that he had initially doubted Keed's decision to tell Tsubasa everything, but Asahi retorted that if he had known this would happen, he would have been against it. Izumi argued that Asahi was going too far and was just making judgments after the fact. But Asahi insisted that Kide was never at fault. It was always these women who came onto him, and now they were hurting Kide like this. Tsubasa couldn't argue with that, and Izumi didn't want Asahi to be so rude, even if he was right. Momoka was also watching the situation from the sidelines. Asahi declared that he couldn't just stand by while Keed was getting hurt, and since they couldn't change what had happened, he came today to tell Tsubasa that she shouldn't approach Keed anymore. Tsubasa spoke up, admitting that she was too childish, and realized the problem she was facing. She never intended to tell Keed what was on her mind, but ended up saying a lot of unnecessary things, and it was terrible. However, she didn't hate or reject Keed. It was Keed who said he was wrong to think he could date and apologized for dragging her into this mess. She insisted that Kide was the one who pushed her away first. To Asahi and Izumi's surprise, Tsubasa already knew she couldn't get close to Kid anymore after he had rejected her. Momoka, worried about Tsubasa, spoke up, saying that if Asahi and Izumi could say those things as Kide's friends, then she could say something as Tsubasa's friend. She pointed out that Tsubasa had also been hurt a lot, and if that's the kind of person Kid was, maybe it was best for her to stop seeing him. Momoka stressed that just because someone has gone through difficult experiences, it doesn't give them the right to hurt others. So, if Asahi and Izumi were going to say Tsubasa was selfish for approaching Kade, she had to make it clear that Tsubasa had been hurt too. Sito was also someone who had forced his own trauma onto Tsubasa and hurt her. And Momoka wanted to make it clear that it was wrong for outsiders like them to interfere in this matter. She told them to leave, and after hearing that, Asahi and Izumi left, because what Momoka said was true. Izumi told Asahi that he was too hot-headed today, showing that kind of anger as if he were holding a grudge. Izumi also commented that if Kid found out about this, he would ask why Asahi would do such a thing. When Izumi noticed Asahi was crying, he understood that Asahi already knew all of that and didn't need to hear anymore. This wasn't something they should have gotten involved in, but Asahi couldn't stop thinking that things would have been better if Tsubasa hadn't shown up. Izumi looked at Asahi in silence and said that it seemed like he was looking after two grown-up children. Meanwhile, Kid was at home taking a day off from school and thinking about the woman he'd met the day before. She was a grown-up, but he didn't feel scared at all, wondering if it was because of her pleasant demeanor or perhaps because she was like Mr. Miyamoto, that he felt at ease. He couldn't stop recalling the woman's words, that men and women, adults and children alike, all have days when they can't stop crying, and no one would scold him, so he didn't need to worry about a thing. Kid didn't realize when he had started to cry, because he knew it was incredibly difficult to just decide to forget everything and pretend nothing had ever happened. He wanted to take his time to face it and move forward again. When he returned to school, Kid decided he would apologize to Asahi and Izumi for making them worry and reassure them that he was okay. After that, he planned to go to the coffee shop to thank the woman and maybe start something new. Meanwhile, the woman at the coffee shop was writing a flyer to hire a part-time worker. She hoped to find someone hardworking to help her out. As for Tsubasa and Kid, no one knew how their lives would unfold from this point on. The next day, on his way to school, Kid saw the coffee shop he had visited before. He remembered that the woman had told him to come back as a customer when he was feeling happy, and that would be the best way to thank her. Kid decided to invite Asahi and Izumi to the shop after school. Izumi was watching a music video on his phone, and then he told Asahi to remember to apologize to Kid if he showed up today. Asahi agreed, then asked Izumi if he was watching his favorite idol. Izumi denied it, and saying that what mattered most was how Kid would act today. You're thinking that Kid's upset, so bringing this up would be like rubbing salt in the wound, and the timing has to be perfect. Right after that, Kid walked into the classroom with a bright smile. Izumi realized that Kid was trying to pretend to be happy. Kid told him not to say that, and admitted that while he was trying, he had accepted it and was dealing with things just fine. Seeing Asahi looking worried, Kid asked if anything was wrong. They went to the staircase, where Kid knew Asahi had argued with Tsubasa. Asahi apologized for acting on his own, which surprised Kid, as the two of them had gone all the way to the girls' school. Izumi explained that Asahi did it because he was worried about Kid, asking him not to be angry, and added that he himself was also to blame for not stopping him. He asked Asahi to reflect on his actions, and Asahi apologized. Still, Kid felt this just made things more awkward for Tsubasa, but since it was a relationship that was over, Kid thought it was all unavoidable. He was genuinely happy that his two friends had done all that for him, and said it was rare to see Asahi get so emotional. It gave Kid the chills seeing him like that. Then he remembered he had asked both his friends if they were free after school to go somewhere he wanted to visit. After school, they went to a cafe, and Asahi remarked that the atmosphere was really pleasant. The owner, Rio, welcomed them, and Cade was glad to see her calm face and smile. Rio brought them the menu and announced that the dessert of the day was cheesecake. The three of them ordered and started chatting as they ate, sharing stories they'd heard about part-time jobs and how tough they could be. Cade said that maybe he should try getting a job like that too, and Asahi asked if there was something he wanted to buy. Cade replied that it was a way to start over, and that he'd wanted to try working for a long time. Asahi worriedly asked Cade if he was okay, but Izumi asserted, why wouldn't he be? This made Asahi realize he was being overprotective again. Izumi stressed that there was nothing wrong with trying a part-time job, and if anything happened, they would figure it out. Asahi commented that they had quite the generous father figure, referring to Izumi, and added that it's important to consider the work environment and the people you work with. He advised Cade that if he got along well with his co-workers, he'd end up staying there for a long time. After that, they continued to enjoy their coffee and cake, and Cade saw a flyer advertising a part-time job at the cafe. In that moment, Cade stood up, because he simply wanted to try something new and move on from the heavy feeling in his heart. He approached Rio and told her he'd seen the part-time job flyer. At the time, he had no idea that meeting this person would soon bring a major change to his life. Cade started working at the cafe, doing tasks like taking orders and serving customers. Rio told him that once he'd been working for a week, she'd like to check in on how things were going. Cade agreed, and mentioned that she was a very thorough teacher. When he addressed her by her last name, he asked if he should call her manager or something similar, but she replied that there was no need to be so formal, and that many customers also called her by her first name. She told him it was fine for him to call her by her first name, and he agreed. She could see that he enjoyed working there, which made her happy. Later, at school, Asahi asked Cade how his part-time job was going. Cade replied that things were going well and the customers were very friendly. Asahi asked if he was still a trainee, and Cade replied that it was time to see if he was suited for this job. Rio said that it wouldn't be good for either of them if Cade wasn't a good fit for the job. Asahi expressed his concern that Cade had decided to try a part-time job without any clear reason. Immediately, he decided to go home to finish his job application. Cade smiled, knowing this was embarrassing. Izumi asked if he knew how to make coffee, and Cade replied that a newbie like him couldn't do that. He just helped with cleaning and carrying things. Asahi wondered why he decided to work at this particular cafe, because he didn't think Cade would work for an older woman. Cade explained that he had actually known Rio from before, and he told his friends about that date. They realized that she was very kind to him. Cade reassured them that he was still keeping his guard up and had no plans to let himself become vulnerable. But somehow, she made him feel like an adult he could trust. Izumi and Asahi wondered what he meant by that, and he said that he felt Rio was like Mr. Miyamoto. He also knew that his two friends were worried because of what had happened before, but because of that, he didn't want to live a life disconnected from everyone else anymore. To be honest, when it came to love, Cade had a feeling from the start that he wasn't cut out for it. So he didn't want to be scared, overreact, and be defensive just to continue living in a small world. He thought that even if he got hurt again, he wanted to do what he could and stay positive, even if just a little. Cade felt it was a little wrong to keep making his two friends worry about him, so he would be more careful not to act recklessly. Izumi and Asahi were both relieved to hear Cade's reassurance. They also told him that it was okay to cause trouble or make them worry. Cade was happy for his friend's support, but was unaware that from behind, Sahara was watching him. Later, Cade went to the cafe for work as usual, and he worked very hard, feeling happy inside. After his shift, he thanked Rio for her help, and Cade was pleased that he had memorized most of the items on the menu, which meant he might be a good fit for the part-time job. Then he heard a girl arguing with a guy. She was saying why he would do things that upset her like that. The guy replied that he was just treating her like any other friend. Cade thought he should get out of the situation quickly. Then the girl yelled at the guy that he was the worst and she shouldn't have liked Sahara in the first place. She slapped him. Cade realized that the guy was Sahara from his class, and Sahara recognized Cade too. He asked if he was on his way home. Kite apologized for witnessing the scene, and Sahara told him not to worry about it. Keed saw that Sahara's cheek was red from the slap and heard Sahara say that he really doesn't understand why people need love when they're dating. He sometimes wonders if people really have that much free time because there are so many other fun things and things one would want to do, and he has his own hobbies. He asked Keed how he felt about that. Keed was reminded of the time he felt he wasn't cut out for love. Sahara continued, saying that he doesn't see this kind of thing as fun, and asked Keed what he thought. Keed didn't know how to answer, and Sahara apologized for asking such a difficult question. Then Sahara continued to ramble that maybe he is someone who doesn't easily develop feelings for or get attracted to anyone, and that he doesn't know much about it himself. Sahara once went to Mr. Miyamoto for advice and was told that it's a possibility and not something abnormal or bad. Kide asked if that was why he just had a fight with that girl, and Sahara replied that their taste in music was a perfect match, that she was a good girl. But when they started dating, she suggested they do couple-like things. But Sahara didn't really want to. He wondered why guys and girls are just naturally expected to do those things. Kide listened to his words. Sahara said that even if Kade told him it was normal for a couple, he still didn't get why it was considered normal. After saying all that, Sahara apologized for rambling and mentioned that he'd always felt they had a lot in common, which is why he kept talking. Key didn't mind, sharing that he's had the experience of realizing he was in love, so he thought his feelings might be a bit different from Sahara's. However, he also knew exactly how it felt not to know what normal is. Sahara thanked Keed and frankly said that he wasn't good with those topics about girls that other guys usually talk about, what they like or want. He thought it was because he just didn't feel that way. Keed wasn't great at that stuff either since he's pretty shy. Still, Sahara stressed that they weren't exactly what you would call normal or common, and really, this whole thing was just too complicated to think about. The next day, Keed went to his part-time job as usual, helping to arrange the new tables and chairs. Rio was very pleased with his work and thanked him for the help. She explained that she had ordered new furniture, but the manufacturer hadn't sent anyone to help set it up. Keed said it was no big deal, but asked if it was okay to replace all the furniture. Rio replied that the old items were pretty worn out, and since she took over the cafe from her grandmother, many things here had been in use until today. While memories can be important, it's not always good to be bound by them. So Rio decided to change everything. She also didn't forget to remind Koid that her grandmother was still healthy, just in case he thought she had passed away. Keed was happy to hear that and reflected on her words about how it's not good to be bound by memories. He realized that even the place where he used to spend time with Tsubasa had changed its furniture. While their friendship was no more, he thought that maybe this was what he needed to start over. Rio's words really resonated with him. Afterwards, Rio shared that she was worried at first when they first talked to her, but now she was really happy because Keed looked more alive than ever, since he had pretty much just been crying then. Keed, feeling embarrassed, asked Rio not to mention it again because it was really cringy for him. But Rio continued, saying he was like a lost puppy in the rain, and it was great to see it running around happily the next day. Keed asked her if he really looked like that, and she laughed, telling him he looks better when he's happy and smiling. Keed felt flattered and thanked her for the kind words. After that, it was time to serve the customers. Keed greeted them and offered to show them to their seats, telling them to call him when they were ready to order. The customers this time were 3 girls, and they turned out to be Aya and Momoka. Aya asked Momoka if it was true that Tsubasa's ex-boyfriend had come to their school. Kide was shocked to hear that, and he didn't know how to react in the situation. Keed overheard them talking about his friends coming to get revenge on Tsubasa, but Momoka denied that that's what had happened. She thought Keed's friends were just really worried about him, so they only came to warn Tsubasa not to hurt him anymore. Tsubasa was being unfairly blamed at the time, so she couldn't help but speak up, and now she really regrets it. Aya said that sticking up for your friends is normal, and she was also surprised they showed up without knowing what they were going to do. Another girl mentioned that she heard those two guys were pretty handsome. Aya also said that Tsubasa has seemed sad lately, and she's worried about her friend. They also don't know the reason for Tsubasa's breakup, which makes them feel sad for her, because her memories with her first boyfriend ended up like this. Keed was certain that these girls were Tsubasa's friends, and the two guys who came with them must have been Asahi and Izumi. He returned to the kitchen with a strange look on his face, and Ryo turned to ask him if something was wrong. She noticed Keed seemed uncomfortable, and also overheard Momoka telling her friend that she hoped everything would blow over soon. Since she had never met Kaid, she didn't know what kind of person he was. Just then, Aya said they should start ordering soon. And when they called for a server, Ryo replied that she'd be right there. She told Keed to go rest in the back room. Keed felt anxious and wanted to work, but Ryo told him it was okay. She went to take the order from the group of girls, while Keed sat in the back room, thinking about how he didn't know any of them, and it seemed they didn't know him either. He wanted to stay positive, and things had been going so well, but he couldn't help but wonder why such a coincidence had to happen. He also felt guilty, thinking it was his fault that Tsubasa wasn't doing well. Just then, Ryo knocked on the door and said she was coming in. She found Keed sitting with his head lowered and his hands covering his face. She reached out to put a hand on his shoulder to ask what was wrong, but Keed reacted sharply, recoiling in panic. He immediately apologized to Ryo when he saw she looked worried about him, and he also said sorry for overreacting. Ryo sat down on the floor to look him straight in the eye and said that it was all right and to just listen to her. She advised him to take a deep breath and then breathe out. Keed slowly calmed down following Ryo's instructions, and she praised him for doing a good job, calling him a good boy. Afterward, she was happy to see he had calmed down, but Kaid apologized for bothering her, saying he should get back to work. However, Ryo told him that she had already closed the cafe, and that she actually wanted to anyway to do some rearranging. She asked him if something had happened between him and the girls who came in earlier. Keed replied that he didn't know them directly, and told her the whole story. Ryo tried to break it down simply, but Keed hadn't mentioned the part about high school, feeling it wasn't relevant. He apologized for troubling her with his personal problems, but she told him he didn't need to apologize because she wouldn't want to meet people from her past either. If it were her, she would have even banned them from her cafe. Keed was surprised at her saying she'd use her authority as the manager. Then Ryo asked if this was also the reason he had cried that other day. Keed replied that it was. That made her think he must be bottling up his feelings. She said that time can heal many things, and even though some things can be painful and unpleasant, he would definitely get through them someday. She didn't want to be irresponsible and just tell him everything would be okay. But she did want him to look on the bright side for now. There are many kinds of love that are just a part of being young. Kaid felt better after Ryo's encouragement, and he told her that he truly thought of her as a real adult. He asked her if she had ever experienced many types of love, or if she'd ever been married. Ryo replied that she'd experienced many kinds of love, but she wasn't married and didn't need a partner. The next day at school, Kaid was on cleaning duty, thinking back to how Ryo had calmed him down, and it made him feel so happy. She's such a good person, and Keed had never thought someone like her could exist. Warm, kind, and approachable, not to mention she's also very beautiful. He had believed she was married with a happy family, but for some reason, he felt glad to know she wasn't married, and he started to wonder if he was thinking the same way as a dog that doesn't want its owner to be taken by someone else. Just then, Asahi came over and told Keid he was heading home first because of his part-time job. But he noticed Keed was acting strange. When asked, Keed replied, he was trying to understand what it feels like to be a dog. Then he asked Asahi about what it means when a grown-up says they don't need a partner. Asahi was surprised and asked why Keed, of all people, was asking that, after he had once said he wasn't cut out for love. Keed admitted that, but he wondered if a person without any special circumstances could say something like that so casually. Asahi explained that if that were the case, they might be prioritizing their work or hobbies over love, because there are many people who aren't interested in romance. Afterward, Cade also went to his part-time job, thinking about what Asahi had said, about how he wasn't interested in love. He remembered how hurt he felt when he realized he couldn't win in a normal way. He felt discouraged thinking he wasn't suited for it. Now, when he looks at Rio, he keeps remembering her words that she wasn't married and didn't need a partner. He felt the atmosphere around her seemed different when she said that, and it made him wonder about the reason behind it and how she felt saying those words. Work hours passed, and after closing the cafe, Cade went to tell Rio he was heading home. She thanked him for his work that day. But as Rio stood up, her foot slipped off the chair and she nearly fell. Cade rushed over to help her. Cade and Rio stood close, looking into each other's eyes, when she suddenly apologized for falling on him and asked if he was hurt anywhere. Cade replied that he was fine. She thanked him for catching her. Rio told him to let her know if he felt any pain. Cade was surprised that she had just touched him, but instead of feeling scared, he felt calm. Then he heard her call his name and apologize for touching him. He also asked if she was hurt, and she replied that she was fine, thanks to him catching her. Cade could see she was okay and started to run away out of embarrassment. Rio was still flustered. As for Cade, he walked all the way to the park, genuinely surprised that while he usually gets the creeps when someone touches him, this time he was completely fine. Cade wondered why he felt that way, whether it was because it was an emergency or because it wasn't intentional, or simply because it was her. He was experiencing new emotions he had never felt before, while Tsubasa seemed to be heading somewhere with a sad look in her eyes. A slight change in her hair made him feel uncertain about what was going to happen in both of their lives. The next day, Cade began to realize that there are always things in life that people don't know. He often thought that life would be easier if there were definite answers somewhere, like a walkthrough for a game. He wondered if he would know more by now if he wasn't still a kid. Cade was confused about why he was thinking so much about Rio just because she fell on him. Rio woke up from the same dream and went to school as usual. In class, Sahara was once again surprised to hear that Mitsuki had gotten another girlfriend, but he quickly adapted as usual. Sahara asked Mitsuki if he thought this one would last, and Mitsuki replied that it depended on his current partner. After that, Mitsuki asked Cade how he was doing lately, and Cade replied that they had actually broken up. This news surprised Mitsuki. However, Mitsuki just said calmly that it couldn't be helped, and he should just move on to the next one. Cade didn't expect to get any advice from him anyway. Sahara whispered to Mitsuki that he doubted anyone could get over it as quickly as him. Cade asked Mitsuki if he ever felt guilty about falling for someone new. Mitsuki was taken aback by the unexpected question from Cade, and Cade clarified that he wasn't blaming him, just asking. Mitsuki replied that he didn't feel guilty at all, and while it would be a completely different story if he broke up on bad terms, when a couple dates and breaks up, it's usually on both sides. Emotionally speaking, if things don't work out, it just means they weren't destined to be together, or something like that. He also said it's not surprising for someone to get hurt in a relationship, but their heart remembers it. Through those regrets, they'll learn how to treat their future partners better. So, he advised Cade to keep enjoying his life instead of moping around, because youth doesn't last forever and will be over before he knows it. Besides, as they say, the best way to mend a broken heart is with a new love. After school, Cade went to a cafe, realizing that Mitsuki and Sahara had completely opposite personalities, but they definitely got along because of it. Cade realized something, that his youth would be over before he knew it. He shook his head to clear those thoughts, feeling like he shouldn't be thinking about all this. Now, at work, he had gone from being a trainee to an official employee. The cafe quickly got busy, and after closing time, Rio commented that it was especially packed today and that the shop usually gets very crowded on weekends. Just then, the shop door opened, and Rio told the person who entered that they were closed, but to her surprise, it was her friend, Manami. Rio happily welcomed her and asked how her married life was going. Manami replied that it was tough, but the happiness she felt outweighed all of it. Rio introduced Manami to Cade, an old friend of hers, and explained she had just dropped by for a visit. Manami praised Ryo's coffee as the best, saying she just had to stop by. Cade then introduced himself as a part-timer, and Manami told him to let her know if Ryo ever abused her power as manager. Cade replied that Ryo was very good to him. At that point, Ryo told Cade that his shift was over and he could head home. After closing up, he overheard Manami telling Ryo that she was worried about her always working alone. And just when she finally hired a part-timer, he turned out to be a cute boy. Manami asked Ryo if she was aiming for a younger boyfriend. Ryo denied it, saying that would be like a crime. Cade heard this from outside, and Ryo said she wouldn't mix her work and private life. And more importantly, Cade was still in high school, so she couldn't even consider it. Because it's just weird for an adult to see a kid as a romantic partner. Although she knew that relationships between people of very different ages sometimes existed, she believed they could only succeed if the feelings between them were truly strong. Cade felt a little relieved and realized she was a true adult, but he still didn't understand why his heart ached after hearing that conversation. Meanwhile, Sahara tells Mitsuki that it's rare for him to say things like that to Cade, like finding a new love. He suspected Cade might be a player, but he doesn't seem like the type to force his views on love onto others. Mitsuki speaks up, saying that Cade seems to have found someone new, but it looks like he's feeling torn up with guilt about the girl he likes. Mitsuki noticed Cade didn't seem to be aware of it, so he just gave him a little encouragement. As for Cade, he couldn't stop thinking about what Ryo said, about how weird it is for an adult to see a kid as a romantic partner. Those words made his heart ache, and he subconsciously pretended he didn't know that. But both the pain in his chest and the insecure feelings inside were the product of suppressed emotions that were slowly building up. Cade remembered that ever since he met Ryo, she had always been kind and gentle to him, creating a warm atmosphere around her. He realized he was drawn to her. When Mitsuki said that a new love is the best solution to heal a broken heart, Cade felt like he had become aware of his own feelings of love, while at the same time experiencing pain. The next day, during class, Cade was lost in thought, and both Asahi and Izumi noticed he looked pretty gloomy. Cade was thinking carefully, and knew he wasn't good at romantic relationships, so maybe he didn't need to worry about having feelings for someone. More importantly, he should be happy that he could like someone else. He recalled Mitsuki's advice to be positive and enjoy his life as a high school student, especially the ability to love. His spirits lifted, Cade stood up and found himself re-energized. Now, he thought that he didn't need to understand this feeling, but just needed to have feelings for her. He wasn't asking for anything more than that, and finally decided to go to the cafe. When he arrived, Ryo greeted him and said he was a little early for his shift. Cade realized he had come to the cafe early and started feeling nervous as he became aware of his own feelings. Just then, Ryo asked him if he wanted to learn how to make coffee, if he was interested. Cade agreed to her offer, but asked if she was okay with teaching him, since he was just a part-timer. Ryo replied that it was no problem, as he was getting used to the job and doing better. She also complimented him on how careful he was with his hands and believed that the coffee he brewed would have a pleasant taste. Cade had no idea Ryo had been watching him that much. And Ryo admitted that she'd seen how hard he worked. Suddenly, Cade called out her name and said that those warm words made him feel happy, giving him a strange feeling, making him feel like he was about to cry and that his heart had been saved. Ryo listened to him, and abruptly, Cade confessed that he likes her. Immediately, he wondered what he was thinking, saying those words, that he didn't need to understand this feeling. While feeling flustered that he couldn't hold back his surging emotions in front of Ryo, Cade wondered if this was how Tsubasa felt at that time. After confessing his feelings to Ryo, he tried to say something else but was too nervous. Ryo simply thanked him and said that hearing that made her really happy as Cade's manager. He was surprised that she just gently brushed it off and asked if they should start practicing next week. She asked him to get ready for work now, and Cade started his shift feeling anxious, feeling extremely embarrassed for saying those words. The words just seemed to tumble out of his mouth on their own. And even though it seemed like Rio didn't understand the message he was trying to send, Keed wondered if that was really okay. You know that Rio doesn't see you as a lover, just as a kid, and she didn't want a romantic relationship in the first place. You understood that in your mind, while Rio just went about her business, but inside, you felt a surge of surprise trying to hide your astonished expression. Meanwhile, at the girls' school, Momoka was shocked to see Tsubasa's new haircut. She asked Tsubasa if it felt weird. Momoka insisted that Tsubasa looked cute, but it was just shocking that she'd make such a drastic change. Anyway, she looks really adorable. Tsubasa thanked her for the compliment and said she wanted a fresh start. She apologized for making everyone worry. Momoka felt a bit emotional too. Later, they were chatting with Aya, who asked why things didn't work out with Sito Keed. Tsubasa said she couldn't go into detail because it involved Keed's privacy, but in short, the reason was that she couldn't handle his past. She thought that Aya had been right. Tsubasa said that when it comes to matters involving sex, she can't help but see the other person as dirty, and the more she thinks about it, the more messed up her head gets, making her feel nauseous. So, even though it wasn't Keed's fault, she said some really hurtful things to him. Aya was shocked and reminded her that she'd told Tsubasa to confirm things with Kaid. But it was unbelievable that Tsubasa would ask Keed to reveal his past and then blame him for it. Tsubasa nodded with a sad expression. That's exactly what happened. Aya and Momoka were speechless at that. Aya spoke up, saying she didn't know what was true back then, so she didn't tell Tsubasa at the time. But actually, back then, there were a lot of intense rumors that Sito was the victim. As Aya got closer to Tsubasa, she asked how Tsubasa could possibly judge Keed and even say such hurtful things to him, which made Tsubasa the one causing harm, leaving her feeling empty. She said Tsubasa's reasoning was so childish. Just because Keid had adult experiences in his past, how could she judge him as dirty and disgusting? Aya said that if Tsubasa can't accept that, how could she ever find love with anyone? This is something everyone goes through sooner or later, because it's normal. Tsubasa was silent for a moment and then asked if she was the weird one for not being able to accept things that are considered normal. Even though she knew what she did to Keed was horrible and unforgivable, she asked Aya what else she could do to deal with this pain. Tsubasa reasoned that she can't just change her perspective because she was never taught about these things. And that's just how she was raised. When she realized that even her own parents had engaged in these acts in the past, Tsubasa felt sick just thinking about it. Now she was asking if she was the strange one, while everyone else was normal. Momoka felt sorry for Tsubasa, while Aya asked if she was talking about her parents or relatives. It goes without saying that she wouldn't feel good, but that has nothing to do with Kaid in this situation. Tsubasa couldn't lift her head as Aya explained that it wasn't her fault, since she was raised that way. But to think that the victims also did those acts, and that makes them dirty, that's just absurd. Besides, why would she say the one thing that would hurt Kaid the most? That's not something you can just say casually. She said that by doing so, Tsubasa had inflicted unnecessary pain on Keed. Tsubasa was on the same level as those idiots who attack others and then blame the victim. She yelled at Aya to shut up because she knew she had said things she couldn't take back. She had regretted it countless times since that day, wondering why she ever said such a thing to Keed. Tsubasa cried out that Aya wouldn't understand how she feels and that this had nothing to do with her anyway. So why was Aya so angry about it? Aya spoke up, saying she had gone through something similar in the past, but her pain was nothing compared to Kaid's. Tsubasa was stunned. As Aya opened up about her own incident, when she was assaulted and then blamed herself, even though it was the guy's fault, she couldn't stand even thinking about it. Now, as she gripped Tsubasa by the collar, Aya asked if Tsubasa was trying to say that her past and the pasts of others who have gone through similar assaults are dirty and disgusting. Tsubasa began to cry, saying that no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't stop thinking about it. And that's why she had to suffer. Momoka, who was standing behind them and saw the whole dramatic scene, started to cry too, and Aya told Tsubasa that she needed to think carefully about what she had done to Cade, because what she did wasn't just blaming him for his past experiences, but was a cruel act of digging into a victim's wounds. Momoka and Aya left, leaving Tsubasa to cry alone and think about everything. She recalled the moment that day when she had blamed Cade, and how he had apologized to her for making her feel uncomfortable and disgusted. But Cade couldn't stand the accusations any longer, and he told Tsubasa to just tell him straight if that's what she really thought. He said that she could only say something like that because she'd never been through it, and asked her not to make him talk about it anymore. Tsubasa began to realize just how terrible Cade must have felt, and she cried silently to herself, knowing there was no way she could be forgiven. Meanwhile, Cade was working at the cafe, and Rio complimented him on learning so quickly. She thought he would need more time to get used to everything, but he was actually very skillful. Cade told Rio she was a great teacher, and she replied that that was all for the day. Later, when Rio got home, she lay on her bed, seemingly without anything on, feeling confused. She remembered the moment Cade confessed his feelings to her, which had flustered her, and she never thought he would say something like that so unexpectedly. She had tried to avoid it that day, but afterward, every time their eyes met, Cade would look away, seeming embarrassed about it. She wondered why this kept happening. Suddenly, a guy walked in and asked if something was wrong with her, and it seemed like they had shared intimate moments before. She replied that it was just a part-timer from the cafe, and it looked like he had a crush on her. The guy asked her if he was her age, and she replied that he was just a high school student, though an adorable one, but she saw him as a little brother or a nephew. The guy reminded her not to play with the pure heart of a high school student, suggesting she could only handle transactional relationships. She retorted that she wasn't playing around at all. She said that the part-timer was a really good kid, but she didn't know if she was mishandling the relationship between a boss and an employee. In any case, she understood that she needed to be careful from now on. The next day, and she helped him step by step, precisely. She thought to herself that he didn't complain at all, which proved he was a really good kid. But she wasn't sure if she should keep pretending as if he had never confessed his feelings. Cade made a cup of coffee and asked if she could taste it. She took a sip and replied that it was better than before. Cade thanked her with a flustered look, which made it very hard for Rio to ignore his cute expression. She told him that was enough for today, and he thanked her for helping him learn more. Afterwards, Cade asked her if she had a moment, and when she asked what he needed, he apologized for saying something weird last time. She pretended not to know and asked what he meant. Cade mentioned the part where he confessed that he liked her. Rio felt exasperated and forced a smile, thinking to herself why he had to bring this up again. She asked if it was really that weird, because knowing he was fond of her made her very happy. Rio wished he would just change the subject, but Cade said bluntly that he meant it in a romantic way when he confessed his feelings to her. She was surprised to hear him say that, and his directness left her feeling overwhelmed. But then, Cade added that he understood she wasn't looking for a romantic relationship and only saw him as a child, so he didn't expect an answer from her. He just wanted to let her know. Rio realized she couldn't avoid this, and she felt he was too young to understand how selfish the words "just wanted to let her know" really were. She wondered why people were like this and why they would confess their feelings even though they knew it wouldn't work out. If they had just kept it to themselves, she could have maintained a good relationship, and this brought back bad memories for her. For now, she told him that she was certain his feelings weren't love. Cade didn't understand her until she said that he knew nothing about her. After she said that, Cade realized she was right about him not knowing anything about her. Then she asked him why he thought it was love. Was it because she was his type? Because she had been kind to him? Or because he had a thing for older women? He swallowed, and she waited for him to speak. Finally, Cade said that from her perspective, he might seem like a child, and she might think he doesn't know anything. And perhaps she only ever showed her professional side to him. But he argued that it was still a part of her, and he felt she was a warm and wonderful person. He was drawn to her personality, Not because she was his ideal type or anything like that. He didn't know how she felt about him, so he apologized for being a bit insensitive, for making light of her feelings. Then Rio spoke up, saying she wasn't as wonderful as he thought, and that she was happy he thought so fondly of her. But what she meant was that he might be misunderstanding his own feelings. She reiterated that he didn't need to expect a response to his confession, but she thought he was a good kid and wanted him to be happy in a normal way. At this point, Kaid wished she would just stop, because he didn't want to have his normal feelings invalidated again. He decided to speak up first, telling her that a lot of things had happened to him in the past, which made him afraid of women, especially older ones. He would break out in a cold sweat and couldn't stop trembling just thinking about a woman touching him. But he felt at peace when Rio touched him. And instead of fear, he felt relieved. He started to think that maybe he was okay now. That's why he saw her as someone special. Rio seemed to have understood something, so she called his name. Cade said that even if it was just a little, he felt happy and his heart started to race. He felt so happy. And if that wasn't love, he didn't know what these feelings were. Moreover, if she said he knew nothing about her, that just made him want to find out even more. Rio listened to his feelings. While Kaid apologized to her for saying such selfish things and making her feel burdened. But to him, this love was a normal and precious thing he had finally found. So he wished she wouldn't say it was just a misunderstanding. Rio had her own anxieties, because all the guys she'd met so far were just friends in name only. Eventually, they would often label their obsession with her as love, and want to marry her just because the time they'd spent on her was considered an investment. If she refused, they would blame her for wasting their years. However, Rio knew Kaid wasn't like that, but she still wanted to teach him something. So she asked Kaid if he was free tomorrow. Kaid replied that he had no classes and was completely free. Hearing this, she mentioned that the shop would also be closed and she was thinking of going shopping. She asked if he wanted to come along, and Kaid replied that he didn't mind, but asked what that had to do with their current conversation. Then, to his surprise, Rio suggested they go on a date for the whole day tomorrow, and she told Kaid to meet her in front of the store at 11 in the morning. And just like that, Kaid arrived at the meeting spot right on time, wondering what was going on, as he had absolutely no idea what was going through her mind. Soon after, Rio appeared in a beautiful and comfortable dress, and she saw that Kaid had arrived before the appointed time. Kaid felt a different sort of vibe from Rio as he wished her a good morning. They started their date by going shopping, and she thanked Kaid for carrying her bags for her. When they finished shopping, Rio said they should go somewhere more private. She took Kaid to an amusement park where they rode the Ferris wheel together. The overwhelming feeling of being on a Ferris wheel with a girl for the first time in his life made Kaid's heart race. Rio then explained why she asked him out today. It was because if they met outside of work, they wouldn't have to worry about their professional relationship anymore, but could focus on the relationship between a man and a woman. If Kaid wanted to know more about that, she told him that if he truly liked her in a romantic way, then he should kiss her right now. Kaid was shocked by such a sudden request, while Rio remained as calm as ever. He wondered why she would say something like that so suddenly and why he was so troubled by it. After all, if he liked her romantically, he shouldn't hesitate to touch or kiss her. But at that moment, Kaid just clenched his fists, wondering why he could never do the things that everyone else considered normal. Rio said that his current expression wasn't one a boy should have when the girl he likes asks for a kiss. If you're feeling rigid and a little scared, she explained that the reason he couldn't do it might not be because of shyness or nervousness. Kaid asked how she knew, and she confirmed that she had asked him out because she wanted to talk to him without the constraints of their employer-employee relationship. Kaid was flustered when Rio mentioned that he used to be afraid of adult women. She realized he was carrying a rather heavy burden, and that falling for a mature woman he could approach normally made him think he was becoming normal again. She told him that if he recognized that her understanding was correct, then she was clearly stating that what he felt wasn't love, but rather friendship, respect, and intimate trust. Love can be classified as liking, but if you don't see the other person for who they truly are, you can't call it love. Keed asked if his feelings for her were just respect and trust, and she replied that she would be very happy if that were the case. But you hesitated when I asked for a kiss, so I think you already have your answer to that. Keed received a logical answer from a true adult, and those words seemed to awaken him, piercing straight through his heart. In the end, he felt as if nothing had changed, which made him break down in tears. Rio felt anxious, wondering what she should do now that she had seemingly hurt his feelings. Then, Cade began to confess, saying he's been unable to move forward since high school. He explained that while the school should have handled it properly, and friends should have supported him, he felt like he was only pushed further away. Tears streamed down his face as he mentioned the 3 tragic years that had passed for him. His hands trembled. He had always been terrified in moments like this. Keed couldn't stop as the words and tears just kept flowing. He said he always felt like an arm was pulling his leg down into the darkness. She couldn't have imagined that Keed's past was so complicated and dark. Keed revealed that after the incident, one of his high school teachers told him he was lucky, and that the teacher was even jealous of him for having had an experience with such a beautiful woman. That comment left Keed feeling shocked and confused. Rio shook her head, asserting that both the teacher and the perpetrator were terrible people. Keed felt consumed by pain and fear, wondering if he was still normal, and if this was truly something to be envious of. He realized over time that if he remained trapped in this mindset, he would never be able to move forward. Keed resolved that he wouldn't change himself, and that he didn't want to. After sharing everything with Rio, he felt the need to apologize for telling her such a disgusting story. But Rio stopped him, saying it wasn't disgusting at all. Now, she fully understood the burden Keed was carrying. She understood what he meant when he said that love was something normal and precious, and that he had thought he'd found that in her. Keed felt that it was okay if this was just a misunderstanding, and also okay if it was only temporary. You longed to live a happy life without fearing anything, and to be loved like everyone else. You didn't want to hide anything from the person you liked. That was the normal life you'd always longed for, but in the end, it only brought you to tears. Rio asked you, what does it mean to be normal? Because everyone, including her, used the word so naturally, but she wondered who could truly be considered normal. Before, she had told you she had no intention of marrying or falling in love, but on matters like that, they become a burden as one gets older. She had given Keed her handkerchief and said that what happened in the past must have caused some kind of trauma. But there are many people who still see an adult woman with no special circumstances who doesn't want to get married as not normal, even though there's nothing that everyone is expected to do. In the end, only Keed could measure for himself what was normal or not. Keed wiped his tears, while Rio told him the choice was his, to move forward, hold on to the past, or throw everything away. No matter how he lived his life, it didn't matter whether it was normal or not. He slowly calmed down and asked Rio if she was ever scared of being different from everyone else. She replied that maybe it was because she was an adult. She explained to Keed that adults have lived longer than him, and that he was still in the middle of his journey. So it was okay if he was unsure or scared, even if he made a lot of mistakes. She advised him not to be bound by the concept of normal, because she was sure there was so much more to it than that. She also said that he was not at fault for what he went through. The fault lies with the person who committed the crime. Nothing more, nothing less. And no matter what anyone tells you in the future, you should never forget that. Keed had cried all his tears out, and soon their trip came to an end. Rio thanked him for joining her today. Keed said he was the one who should be grateful, and that he was truly sorry for causing her trouble. He bowed his head and thanked her for everything she had said. Hearing this, she felt relieved and told Keid that if it wasn't him, she wouldn't have made time for this in the first place. She had ended up not being able to return their feelings, and the reason she wanted to have a serious talk with him was because there was a relationship of trust between them. She felt that building this kind of relationship was much more difficult than romantic feelings, at least for her. However, after seeing Cud being so honest yesterday, she once again thought about how wonderful it is to care for someone. Cade asked her about the first time, and she smiled, replying that it was when her older sister brought her fiancé home, and she looked so happy. Cade was captivated by her smile, then she suggested they meet again at the cafe as manager and staff. After that, they said their goodbyes, and on his way back, Cade realized what a truly wonderful person Rio was. He had received so many precious words from her, and felt he didn't deserve them. It seemed his feelings for her weren't love, and that he had made many mistakes and messed things up. But at least, it wasn't meaningless because the feelings he felt were not meaningless. Cade wiped his tears and remembered Rio's words again. For a moment, his ear hurt a little as he thought that something might have happened to Rio. He figured it could also be an unconscious bias and decided to ignore it, continuing to walk forward. He wondered if he had unintentionally hurt someone with his words and feelings. She realized it was her brother-in-law. He asked if she was doing well, and he simply replied that everything was fine. Rio asked if he saw the sign that said the cafe was closed, and he replied that the lights were still on, so he came just to see her. She asked if he wanted anything to drink, and he thanked her, saying he was glad to see she was doing well too. Rio mentioned that she'd just been thinking about her older sister that day, but her husband replied that he didn't really miss her, because she had never left his mind. As it turned out, Rio's older sister had passed away. The next day, Tsubasa brought a juice with her to apologize to Aya for what had happened before. She had thought a lot about it, and realized that her words and actions had been awful. She understood that many things are difficult to say, but Aya had been direct and clear with her. She was very grateful for that. Aya accepted Tsubasa's apology and said that she really liked Tsubasa's honesty. She also apologized for being a third party, yet being the one who advised Tsubasa to look into Cud's past, only to turn around and start blaming her. Afterward, Tsubasa admitted that she understood everything Aya said was for her own good, and they hugged to make up after their earlier argument.